Good evening, everyone. It's Tuesday night, and that means it's time for another edition of USA Hockey's Officiating Zoomcasts. This Tuesday, I will be your host. I am Scott Zelkin, the manager of the Junior Officiating Development Program for USA Hockey, as we talk about the ever-challenging and always frustrating task of managing mistakes. We are a profession where perfection is always expected, but hardly ever achieved. And so discussing mistakes is something every official, and actually no matter what sport you're in, is going to have to come to grips with. And to do this, we've got a couple of USA Hockey's finest officials, two people who make very few mistakes based on their, as you'll know when we introduce them and talk about their distinguished careers, but they're going to help us out. So first, from the Green Mountain state of Vermont, just outside of Burlington, we bring you Chelsea Rapin. Chelsea has been a USA Hockey official for about 10 years. She works, not only does she work within USA Hockey's auspices, but she is also a top-end Hockey East official. Just knocked it out of the park this past weekend during the Hockey East Women's Championship game, as well as also representing USA Hockey on the international stage. So Chelsea, welcome, and thanks for joining us tonight. Our other guest this evening is coming to us from Michigan, Timmy Mayer. Timmy has been with USA Hockey for well on over 20 years. He's a graduate of the Junior Officiating Development Program and has worked the full alphabet of leagues around the country, from the AHL to the IIHL to the ECHL, the UHL, and every other HL there is. In addition to that, Timmy has worked extensively internationally and was one of our bright stars on the Olympic stage about 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago to the date here, when he represented USA Hockey in South Korea at the Winter Olympics. So Timmy, welcome, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having us.
As we do for every one of these Zoomcasts, we're going to start out, and as we're talking about our topic of managing mistakes, as we do with every one of our Zoomcasts, the first thing we're going to do is throw up a poll. We're going to kind of throw some questions at you, get what your thoughts are, and just kind of survey everyone on some topics all around managing mistakes. So I'm going to throw this up there. We'll spend a couple of minutes, but here we go. How strongly do you agree with this statement? Mistakes happen. There's nothing I can do about them, so I won't worry about them. Do you strongly agree? Somewhat agree? Neither agree or disagree? Somewhat disagree, or you strongly disagree? Number two, in your opinion, what contributes most to mistakes on the ice? Physical fatigue, mental fatigue, lack of rule knowledge, or lack of hustle? Few good options for you there. True or false, an official who improves his or her rule knowledge will limit their potential for mistakes. Certainly hope we get a pretty good grouping of answers on that one. And then, how strongly do you agree with this statement? There's no such thing as a perfect game for an official. And judging from the size of our audience tonight, it looks like both Tim and Chelsea brought their respective fan clubs along. We've got a really large audience out there tonight, so we've got a lot of votes to tally here. So we'll wait a little bit before we share the results with everyone. All right. How strongly do you agree with the statement that mistakes happen? There is nothing I can do about them, so I won't worry about them. Well, the majority of our audience strongly disagrees with that, and the vast majority either somewhat or strongly disagrees with that, or somewhat disagrees or strongly disagrees. Listen to me. See, I'm already making some mistakes. In your opinion, what contributes most to mistakes on the ice? Mental fatigue and lack of rule knowledge are what are leading us here. And then, an official who improves his or her rule knowledge will limit their potential for mistakes. 96% of you think that's a true statement. That's probably a good statement to agree with there. And then there is no such thing as a perfect game for an official. The majority of you strongly agree or somewhat agree with that statement. There are a few of you, though, that do think it's possible to to have a perfect game. So with that being said, I think those are some good ways to kind of begin our topic. And Tim, I'll kind of throw it to you first before we kind of get into some specifics. When I reached out to you and said, hey, I want to talk about managing mistakes on the Zoomcast, and I'd like you to join Chelsea and I for this topic, what went through your mind? What were you thinking about?
That you thought that I'd be good because, I have lots of experience with mistakes and working through them. But no, it's a really good topic. It can be very hard mentally to deal with mistakes, overcome mistakes, and even try and think that you can fix mistakes. And so in saying that, I think that the funniest thing to me was, since refereeing is not black and white, in my opinion, the first poll question, mistakes happen. I strongly agree with that. And then as it goes on, I strongly disagree with the rest of it. So again, it's not black and white to me. There's two different answers to one question. And I think that can kind of sum up what we do as referees in a lot of different circumstances or situations during a game.
Oh, for sure. And Chelsea, what comes to your mind when I said, hey, come on, jump on in, let's talk about mistakes?
I must be good at it. I must be good at making mistakes and maybe recovering from them. But no, I think everyone makes mistakes, and that's part of the beauty of being a referee, is you do get to learn from those mistakes, and you get to, go out the next game and try and fix that mistake that you might have done the game before. And I think that's the beauty of this profession.
Yeah, and so I think, right, we have to acknowledge that mistakes are going to happen. So that first poll question, and you guys both hit on it. Look, if I looked at you, Tim Mayer, or I looked at you, Chelsea, and I said, have you made any mistakes? You're both going to say yes, right? And I think if we're going to share, God knows I've made plenty of mistakes. I think that's why they asked me to host this one as well. And we have to know we can make mistakes. And I'll ask you, Tim, just give us an example. What's a big mistake you made while officiating hockey that you'd want to share with our group here?
One of the biggest ones was in the playoffs, before video review and anything of that nature, is allowing a goal after consulting with my teammates and both the linesmen that were working the game, and consulting with the goal judge, and taking some time to make a decision. And I allowed a tying goal that never crossed the goal line, never went in the net. And that team went on to win. Thankfully, it wasn't a deciding game, but win that playoff game in overtime, because I allowed a goal that should have never counted. Yeah. And I let that beat me up for quite a while. It was earlier in my career, and it took me some time to get over, but I learned some valuable lessons in going through that, that I still keep with me and use today.
Yeah. And that's, I think, and Chelsea, I'm going to ask you the same question to kind of share, and I'll even give an example of my own here, but where we want to go with this isn't that we made a mistake. It's what are we doing about it? And how do we avoid them? But, so since we're in the sharing mode here, why don't you tell us a little bit about one of your bigger mistakes?
I mean, one of my bigger mistakes was also during a playoff game, very important game, right? Crucial that you should know the rules. And it happened to be that, I do multiple rule books. We all do multiple rule books, right? It was a simple power play, 2 people in the box, they scored a goal. So one of those players has to come out. In different rule books, different people come out. So one of the players, the one that didn't offset that, or wasn't the reason why they were playing down, came out. Our crew didn't notice it, but I was the one addressing that goal. So I should have really caught it, because I was the last one, reporting the goal, seeing that player leave, and hesitated, thought I don't think that's right, but then just let it happen. So learning from those opportunities of like, you need to know your rule knowledge. You need to take a moment before you drop the puck, know that you've got the right rule going on, and then, playing on. If you don't, if you do, if you don't, then you need to blow your whistle, change players, put the right person up. But that's a rule knowledge thing. So that's preparation. I know we're going to talk about that going forward, but if you know the rules, you can prevent that from happening in the first place.
Right. And so, you've talked about something that maybe is a controllable. And Tim has talked about something that, the game happens fast. Sometimes we see things, sometimes we don't. I happened to be working a game a long, long time ago, and it was on a relatively big stage on Hockey Night in Canada. And I had a player from Vancouver got high sticked by his own teammate and split open. And there were a whole bunch of players together, and I called a double minor penalty on a player from Calgary when it was actually a Vancouver player's teammate that cut him open. And Vancouver scored 2 goals on the power play and won the game on a Saturday night in front of millions of Canadian viewers by a goal. And like you said, Tim, you beat yourself up. And so it's how you react, how you prepare, all of those things. And we'll talk about that now. And I think the one thing we want to, the one thing that we all probably have to acknowledge here is there any such thing as a perfect game? To you guys, in your mind, have you ever worked a perfect game? And does it exist, Chelsea?
I don't think so. I always can find something that I can do better in a game. And I always want to strive to find something to do better in a game.
Tim?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. In fact, I don't even think you can have a perfect period, to be honest with you. And I know we'll touch on it later, but that becomes where I would like to talk about self-evaluation. Whether either team or your teammates or the fans or anyone think you're doing a great job, you're never actually perfect. And that goes for the players as well as the coaches. I think that they could sit here with us and tell you there's no such thing as a perfect game for either coaches or players or officials. And that's okay. That's natural, and that's part of sport. But in saying that, we like to limit our mistakes. And if you're self-evaluating and kind of you're conscious of those things, then you can limit them and you can keep them to yourself. You don't have to, it's just stuff that, you're working on, part of your game. It's a challenge, with yourself to be better and to work through things. But it could be small things like positioning stuff, or the way you talk to a player or a coach, or the way you communicated with a captain, or something like that you might say, hey, I'd like to do that differently next time, or maybe I should go this route with how I explain this to it's all those small things that can add up. So in a long answer, no, I don't think there's a chance for a perfect game.
Right. So let me throw this up at you here real quick, Chelsea, and let's just talk about the first part, because you kind of hit on it with your story about, rule knowledge. How can we prevent them? Let's not even talk about how we manage them when they occur, but first let's spend a few minutes and let's talk about preventing mistakes. And then I'm going to ask you if you can even prevent all of your mistakes. But how do we prevent our mistakes?
I think one way is preparation. So just like I said, rule knowledge. So knowing what rule book you're in and what game you're reffing. So yes, this is a USA Hockey Zoomcast, but I mean, people work different leagues, and different leagues have different rule books. So making sure you know what rule book you're in and the rules for that rule book can prepare you when you step on the ice, to make that correct call, because you know that call. Another thing would be knowledge of your positioning, or your good positioning, making sure you're in the right spot to make that call. Conditioning, that poll question was physical conditioning, physical fatigue. If you're tired and you're kind of out of it, that makes your brain really work harder when your legs are working hard. And there's so much stuff going on. If you're in good condition, then your body can take up that mental capacity a little bit more. If you're kind of putting all energy to your body and to your brain, it's hard to, put 100% effort in that mental aspect of it. Hard work. I think I'm a firm believer in hard work. If you're working hard, you're going to be able to hopefully catch those mistakes before they happen. And then Timmy talked about self-evaluation. I think that's a great way of preventing them. So taking a step back after a game and saying, what could I have done better? Also by looking back at a game, did I make a mistake? If you don't ever look back at a game, you're like, well, that game was done. We're gone. It's over. It's past. But you don't know what to correct going forward. Knowledge of making that mistake is a big step. Hey, I made this mistake. How do I fix it? And I think that's what we're going to get into in a couple of slides with a video, is knowing, hey, I made a mistake. Now what's the next step to fix it and to address it?
No, for sure. And Timmy, why don't you, expand a little bit on the self-evaluation and then any of the other things Chelsea hit on, because they're all great.
Well, and I think Chelsea covered a lot. We agree. She really hit the nail on the head with a lot of those things. I guess I'll just add to them a little bit. I totally agree with all the things that she said, and I guess I'll just piggyback on that and say focus and concentration. And that can be, we've all been there where we might be struggling, or we did make a mistake and it's weighing on us. So we need to, you can literally just tell yourself to referee whistle to whistle. Now, in saying that, just because the whistle blows, sometimes we have to work harder after the whistle than we do during, but just breaking the game up in sections and breaking the game down and working it and separating and saying, hey, that's over and now I'm moving on. I think those are big things. Rule knowledge for sure, knowing the rules. And in saying that, I think it's a good idea when Chelsea says we all work in different rule books and come across some different situations that they're handled differently in different leagues. So before the game, a pregame meeting with your teammates, no matter what level you're working, whether it's minor hockey or college hockey, it doesn't really matter, because I even know the USA hockey rules are different for some guys that work high school hockey. And it's good to go over all the, where does a high stick puck go? Can they change if the goal frame's dislodged? Is it a penalty if you shoot it out of out of play? Do we play with the trapezoid here? And just refresh. I like to do that every single game with our team and just say, hey, listen, this is what we got tonight. This is what we play. And then also with trying to prevent mistakes, I guess I would lead into taking our time. So if something doesn't look right, or like Chelsea said, she had the player coming out of the penalty box, it's better to take that extra second and come together as a group and a team. And then we can avoid mistakes, because in saying that, I think it's really important. You're not out there by yourself, whether you're working a 2-man game, 3-person game, 4-person game. It's all about your teammates as well. So you can lean on them. They can lean on you. We can all use each other for a support network and a support system. And I think that helps alleviate mistakes, because we've all been out there where I've had guys pick me up before. And I know for sure, I think that I've helped pick other guys up before. And that's really important, because we don't have anybody else out there, looking out for each other, except, the people wearing black and white.
And Chelsea, Tim talked about pregame meetings and going over those things before the game. And you talked about hard work and working hard. Those are still working hard before the game. That's hard work before the game too, right? And I'm going to guess when you sit down, you might work a high school game in Burlington on a Friday night, and Saturday you're down at Northeastern working a college game. You're doing those things, aren't you?
Yeah, for sure. So it's important to meet ahead. I know this year USA Hockey has kind of allowed us to be able to be a part of a Zoom call with NHL officials. And the big thing that I think I took away from that is they meet every game before, explain, what happened the game before, if they had the game, if they've seen both teams, but rule knowledge, they go over a rule every single time they meet. So this is the rule that we're going over. I thought it was very interesting to see even those NHL officials really hone in and work hard before the game even starts.
Yeah. And recognizing, we put that poll question up about what causes mistakes and physical fatigue, mental fatigue. I think we have to acknowledge that we have a lot of people in our audience that might work more than one game on a Saturday, or might work more than 2 games on a Saturday. And I think we have to acknowledge that for those officials, Tim, the more games you work on a day, you have to recognize yourself, and this is part of self-evaluation, that, hey, you might be a little bit tired, a little more tired, and than you were at 8 a.m, now at 4 p.m. And you might have to try and focus a little bit harder, or just recognize that. And so you're trying to be on top of your game to give those players, those kids at 4 o'clock, the same effort you were giving them at 8 o'clock, right?
Absolutely. And that's the thing. I mean, we got to go out every single time we touch the ice, and you have to give it 100%, because the kids or the players playing in the game and the coaches, they deserve our best. Every time we go out there, we need to do our very best to give them our very best. And so if you're getting to a point where you're working too many games or something, that's part of self-evaluation, saying, last Saturday I did 4 games, and 2 out of the 4 games, maybe I wasn't at my best. Or, the 4th game, I wasn't able to give them 100%. And that's part of self-evaluation, and cut your game count back.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about preparation, and it's interesting, and I say this in every Zoomcast, and I'm going to say it now, even though I'll probably be able to say it in 20 or 25 minutes. We've talked about pregame meetings. We've talked about being a good teammate on the ice. We've talked a little bit about being a strong in position, being a solid, having good fundamentals, good positioning, good rule knowledge. We've done separate Zoomcasts on all of these things. They're all intertwined. If you're solid fundamentally, you're going to put yourself in a better position to see a play, to limit your mistakes, right, Chelsea? I mean, nothing is out on an island by itself, right? It's all together.
It totally is. And I mean, if you have the right positioning, you can make that call. If you can't see the call, then yeah, it's going to be a mistake because you can't see the call. But that's one thing that you can fix. So I do think they're all interconnected. And I mean, a lot of this comes into play, right? It's not typically just one thing in a game that you're missing. It's everything. You want to make sure that it's all intertwined and you are at the best that you can be that game.
Right.
And I do think fatigue is a huge factor of it. How do we prevent fatigue is a total different thing. Conditioning could be it. Focus could be it. Concentration. I think that's a whole different topic in itself. But yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of ways that we can prevent making mistakes.
And so, with all of that being said, no matter how much preparation we do, no matter how good our rule knowledge is, sometimes a mistake's going to happen, right? Because we've all agreed, at least the 3 of us agree, and the majority of our audience agrees, that there's no such thing as a perfect game. So there's always going to be some sort of mistake on the ice, and accepting that you're going to make a mistake, or that there might be mistakes, and accepting those mistakes are kind of 2 different things, right? So, no matter how much preparation, sometimes they happen. So now let's talk about, what are we going to do about it in real time? So what are we going to do if a mistake happens in a game and we know it happens? Like, what are we going to do? How are we going to handle, Chelsea, your situation? How are we going to handle, letting the wrong person out of a penalty box? Are we going to handle it? Are we going to pretend it didn't exist? Are we going to say I'm always right? How are we going to handle those things?
I think the biggest thing that I learned out of that is taking a deep breath. Take a deep breath. Let your body think. Let your body calm. You're able to think a little bit clearer when you calm yourself. And then you can be like, no, I need to blow the whistle and stop it. Or if you do notice that, then you got to kind of get yourself out of that negative self-talk and get yourself to call that next call and be present in the game and not lose out like, oh, I'm thinking about it for 15 minutes. Like, I just missed that call. I cannot believe I just missed that call. What's the next step? So taking a deep breath will calm you. That's kind of been my trick is, okay, I think I just did something bad. I'm going to take a deep breath. Okay, I'm going to calm myself. All right, I need to refocus. I need to get out of this. I can't sit here and negative self-talk myself. If I miss a call, if I make the wrong call, if a coach is screaming at me because I made the wrong call, taking a deep breath, calming yourself down, and trying to be present in the game has kind of helped me moving forward past mistakes.
And Timmy, how about, okay, so now you're skating down the ice, the game's going great, you're on cruise control, everything's perfect. All of a sudden the body goes down and your arm's up in the air, and then you realize the player toe picked. Or you've called it and your partner comes up and says, you know what? Hey, Timmy, that guy just stepped on a stick or something like that. How are you handling that stuff?
You know what? The situation, I think, to me is that's a fixable mistake if you can identify clearly with your teammates on the ice that we made an error. I think it is totally okay to go over and explain it. You're going to have one real happy team and you're going to have one real angry team. But that's part of our job. And it is totally okay to go over there and admit your mistake, say, this is how we're going to go and we're going to fix it. And we're going to move on. What's done is done, and we're going to move forward. So for me, I would choose to not assess that penalty if at that whistle at that point in time that my teammates had, after I killed the play, came over and told me that I booted it. I am totally okay with saying this penalty should not be assessed. I made a mistake. Now, we've all been there where we don't know that, and we've done the same thing, and we can't correct it. And so we continue on from that point. What's done is done. We put that behind us. And just because we made a mistake there, we have to keep going. And it doesn't matter what time it is in the game. We have to keep refereeing. And that doesn't stop. Even if we make a mistake, we can't say, well, I missed one on this team, so I'll miss one on this team. The old quote unquote marbles in your pocket, keeping it all even. That's not an option as a referee. You have to keep refereeing.
So we're clear for our audience on an obvious mistake where we can go back to my example where a teammate high-sticked one player on the same team high-sticked his teammate, and everybody knows that you are okay with proverbially picking up the flag and saying Absolutely. We have no foul on the play.
Absolutely.
And I would agree with that. And I think that's a newer philosophy. That is not something that was ever acceptable 20 or 30 years ago. But when we talk about everything now, it's all about let's get the call right. And we want to make the right call. Now,
and it doesn't matter how long it takes us. It does not, in saying that, we have to be reasonable, but it does not matter how long it takes us, what channels we go through, talking to our partner, talking to the linesman, talking to the other referee, because at the end of the day, you're exactly right. All we want to do is get it right.
No, for sure. So now I am going to put up a video here, and we're going to look at a couple of videos, a couple of examples here of situations, or actually it's one play but on a couple of different angles. And then we're going to talk about it on the end, on the other side. So let me do this. I'm going to spotlight it. And let's watch the play. Maybe we'll watch the play. Here we go.
Coming into the game, him and Paterka led the team in shots on goal. Razor fires, scores! Short-handed marker.
Okay, so we're gonna watch it one more time here in a second, and this is from this last winter's World Junior Championship up in Edmonton, of which USA Hockey came away with the gold medal.
Just a little play off the boards. He gets underneath the German defenseman.
Okay, so we've seen that, and we went and we dropped the puck, and the game moved on. But in reality, this is what happened in this play.
Offside goal. We're more used to it in the National Hockey League, Greg, with people up in the eye in the sky and everything else, but that happened so quickly. Yeah, and I think it.
So one more time, this play was offside.
National Hockey League, Greg, with people up in
And for you, Chelsea, I'm gonna do this,
Yeah, and I think it.
and I'm just gonna come back here. I can tell you, Chelsea, that official, that linesman, or none of the officials for that matter, had any idea that play was offside until they came back on the ice for the next period. And the German coach called him over to the bench and started giving it to him, saying, "You missed that play, it was offside." So when that happens to you, what are you going to do? How are you going to react? Because that's going to play with your mind a little bit, isn't it? And that's a
100%.
challenge. So that's a mistake we didn't know we made. And let's just assume that the officials trusted the German coach who told them he had looked at the video and they'd missed the play by this much. How are you going to react?
Well, hopefully I'm going to be able to take a deep breath and go about the game. But that's easier said than done, honestly. It would probably get into my brain a little bit and make me second guess myself for the next couple of minutes. Like, was it really offsides? Did it really? I didn't think so. My partners didn't think so. The refs didn't think so. No one said anything. And then you're sitting there spiraling and thinking. But really, goal is to stop that negative self-talk and be like, okay, know the facts. I was at the blue line as close as I possibly could after I got the puck dropped. I didn't see it from my angle go and be offsides. Stick to the facts, try and be present in the game. All right. Move on past that play, go forward. All right. I got the rest of the game, rest of the period to get through. We need to get the right calls here. You need to move on and then assess that later. It's easier than said than done, for sure. But sticking to the facts, hey, you got a period ahead of you. You need to get the rest of the game right. We'll deal with that call later.
And Timmy, how about you?
Well, I've been in situations like this many different ways. Sometimes I was able to watch the video myself between periods, and I went out and had a simple conversation and apologized. So, and that apology is, I'm sorry. It's my fault. There's nothing we can do about it now. I'll be better as the game goes on, or however you might want to put it. I've had it where I went out there like this official, and I didn't get to look at it between periods. I had no idea that I made a mistake. And like Chelsea said, it's you're taking the coach's word on a play like that, which sometimes they're telling you the truth and sometimes they're not. But it's going to mess with your head either way. And like she said, taking a deep breath, and if that was after the first period, I have 40 minutes to keep working hard. I'm going to work even harder. And you have to totally forget about that play. It's, again, like she said, it's easier said than done. But you owe it to yourself, you owe it to the game, you owe it to your teammates to, and even if it makes you feel like, hey, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, I'll move on. If that's what you have to tell yourself, then that's what you have to tell yourself. If you're confident that you know, and you think that you'll be better and not, you know, no, I didn't make a mistake, and say, I'll deal with it after the game and have that confidence. You know, there's a lot of different ways. Unfortunately, now with all the video we have and at all different levels, it makes our job sometimes easier and sometimes it makes it more difficult.
Right. I mean, even at the youth level, there's live barn feeds, there's tons of stuff where, you know, for our audience working at the grassroots level, they may still even get an opportunity to see a video in between periods if they're working a game where there's a flood of the ice rink and things like that. And I think that the takeaway that I'm hearing from both of you is getting yourself mentally back into the game. It's not even at the moment, not necessarily saying, well, I should have done this better. It's all between the ears. It's saying, I need to recenter myself. I need to refocus myself because I've still got work to do. And I can't let that call ruin the next 40 minutes, the next 20 minutes, the next 12 minutes, whatever it is, right? I mean, that's really the biggest challenge that you were talking about, right, Chelsea?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Tim, you know, so you hit on it a little bit a second ago, but I want to circle back to this. How are you communicating with teams over mistakes? Like, how are you communicating with teams? Like you talked about saying, I'm sorry, and I'll be better next time, or I'll work harder next time, and those things.
I really have had success, unfortunately, with making mistakes throughout the years, of going over and looking, whether it's apologizing to a player personally for missing a high stick, or apologizing to a coach for making a mistake or an early whistle or whatever. I don't have a problem looking someone in the eye and saying, I'm sorry, it's my fault. You know, I can't fix it. I will continue to work hard and I'll be better. And I've had a lot. If you tell someone that and you're looking them in the eye, what could they possibly say after that? I guess that's my biggest thing. And if they do, it's probably pure emotion. I think most people would recognize that, hey, he or she is really out here trying their best. They're giving this game their all. They really, really care. And I think once they can see that side of you, it makes it very easy for them to say, hey, these guys or girls, they make mistakes, because if they can self-evaluate, you know, they know when the fourth line was on and it shouldn't, you know, and a goal was scored against, and they're like, shoot, you know what? I shouldn't have had the fourth line on there, or whatever it might have been. But when you can basically communicate and talk with people on that kind of level and make them relax, it tends to make myself relax, which in turn is going to help me going forward, try and eliminate future mistakes, but also get past other mistakes that I've made.
Yeah. And Chelsea, the one thing is, you don't want to have to be apologizing too many times in the same hockey game, right?
Right. I was just going to say that, you know, it works once, maybe twice, but you want to make sure that you're not doing that often. And because it loses credibility, right? So the more you do it, the more they're going to be like, man, this ref is out to lunch today. They are not paying attention. They have no idea what's going on with the game. No, right. So you want to make sure that you use that one or two times appropriately, and other times you want to learn, right? We were talking about this before. We want to learn from our mistakes. It might be hard to do it in that present game, but going forward, like, man, my rule knowledge was not where it needed to be there, or I was really out of shape during my third game. I need to prepare and I need to do a little bit more physical conditioning. So I'm making sure that I'm in the mental space so that doesn't happen again in the future.
Yeah. And I think, and I told you earlier, I'd say it again, but if you go back, we had a great Zoomcast. One of our first ones was communication with teams. And we had a youth tier 1 coach as well as a coach from the American Hockey League. And both of them said the same thing, which is what Timmy said is if the official tells me they're sorry or they made a mistake, I don't have a big comeback. Now, with that being said, we also live in the real world here. And every once in a while, there is going to be that coach on the bench that is going to take the apology. It's going to go in one ear and out the other, and they're going to continue to yell and scream. And I think both you, Chelsea, and you, Timmy, would agree with me. You know, USA Hockey has a very strong zero tolerance policy for abuse. Just because we make a mistake does not give a coach or a player a continued right to verbally abuse us, correct? And so we want to put a stop to that as quickly as possible as well, right, Timmy?
Absolutely. And Chelsea hit I mean, I just want to elaborate the whole credibility thing. We've talked about all this stuff that we can try and that we can work on and things we can help, to try and eliminate and prevent mistakes from happening, because we can only apologize so many times to players and coaches and whatnot. So and then we lose our credibility. So all these things that we've talked about, it's all trying to minimize mistakes. You could never totally eliminate them, but minimize them. And then we're talking about just the mistakes that us as officials would recognize or are cognizant about. Those are the mistakes that we're okay with making because we're always constantly learning. I will say Kevin Collins, who longtime NHL linesman and USA Hockey Hall of Famer, once told me when I was younger, he said, the best officials aren't the best because they're the best officials. They're the best because they continually can work through things and get past things. And that, he said, that's what makes them the best, is because they can turn the other cheek and move on from situations very, very quickly and forget about them and move on and keep doing their job effectively. He said those are the best officials. And that always struck me as it was something I've always thought about, because it's very, very difficult to do during a game, but you have to learn how to do it to become a complete official.
There's a saying, and I have it written down on my notes here, on my show notes here. And it's just 2 words. It's closer's mentality. And what I mean by that is, a baseball pitcher, the closer comes in the 9th inning to save the game. And every once in a while, even with, the great Mariano Rivera or Bruce Sutter or somebody like that, the ball would end up over the fence and the other team would score the winning run and the closer would fail. But that closer would come back out and have to do it again the next night, right? And so you've got to, like Timmy said, Chelsea, you've got to be able to move on. You've got to be able to get past your mistakes, right? And even from one game to the next. So if you have a bad game on a Friday night in a college in a college series, and we all have bad games with multiple mistakes, what are you doing to get yourself ready to go the next night? How do you use that quote unquote closer's mentality?
It's tough. I mean, it really depends on what mistakes. Like, do you go review your mistakes, right? Like, I'm going to go watch the video and see what I did wrong. That could be an option. Another option could be to just reset. Don't let it get to you. You know your stuff. You know your rules. You're going to go out and reset. Every game's a new slate. You want to get out there and have a positive experience. So it varies, right? Like, it depends on what mistakes you make. Is it more physical conditioning? Hey, I need to get into the gym and do more. Is it more mental conditioning? Hey, I had a rough week at work. I was in no shape to work that game Friday. I need to get some rest. So you go sleep, right? There's multiple different aspects of why you make mistakes. I think it's how we learn from them and how we prevent them and how we fix them and going forward. That's really going to make you a successful official going and allowing you to turn the cheek, just like Timmy said, learning, adapting, and being able to, move past it.
Yeah. And Tim, like, have you had situations where, okay, you don't have a good night on Friday that you're just not even going to think about it and just start over on Saturday and not review tape and kind of forget about self-evaluation, forget about all that stuff. Just say, you know what? I had a bad night. I'm going to start over tomorrow. Or like my mother used to tell me, get back in bed and now get out of it on the right side of the bed instead of the wrong side.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I've been around for so long. I've been put in so many different situations, and like Chelsea said, a lot of times I like to go review the video. I think the video is a really helpful tool for learning, and also you can see so many things. It might not. It might be something as simple as saying, "Well, I didn't work hard to get to the net there, so I wasn't in great position." So next time, I'm just going to remember, I have to always work hard to get to the net, and it's an easy fix. I mean, yeah, you might have made a mistake in the past, but you're not going to let that happen again because you've seen the bigger picture. Now, yeah, I have had games where I wanted to crawl in a hole and not, and not even finish the game. I think those are almost easier because I'm so excited for, like, it's better for myself to have a game back to back, because if I have 4 or 5 days to sit and dwell on it, like I say that I won't, but we all do. I've had many sleepless nights. It's always better to get back on the horse and get right back in the saddle and do it all over again. I find I'm much more relaxed and successful when it's time to go right back out there. And I find you're more dialed in after you've had a tough night, because as officials, we always want to be better. We want to be the best official we can be, or else we wouldn't be out there. And so you kind of challenge yourself, and you want to accept that challenge and go out and be the best that you can be, knowing that those nights don't happen. They're few and far between. Or they better be. But it's something that I really think is part of the challenge to this business that we all really enjoy.
And just as we go back to that tape from the World Juniors, I can tell you that official, because we're all human, even a top level official like that, when he found out about it, he admitted that the next 10 minutes of that hockey game were very challenging for him to get into. However, he looked at the tape afterwards. He said, I was a little slow getting to my line, but I know what offsides is. I've done this 1,000 times or hundreds of thousands of times. So I know I need to work harder to make sure I don't get beat to my blue line, even after I drop a puck. And he put it behind him. And he went out and he had a fantastic rest of the tournament, but he had to almost look at it, give himself a mental or a verbal pat on the back, and then move forward. So, and that's somebody at the highest levels. But let's talk now, Chelsea, about, let's say it's that 14-year-old first or second year official that went out and nothing went right. They made that typical mistake of dropping the puck with too many players on the ice, and all 30 fans in the stands are screaming and yelling, and they made some of those mistakes. And they walked off the ice and they knew it. And honestly, it wasn't a whole lot of fun. It wasn't a whole lot of fun to be out there in that game. What advice do you give to that 14-year-old first or second year official?
I've been there. We've done it. It happens. It does to a lot of people. Whether you're a beginner, whether you've been doing it for years, it happens. It's what we do moving forward. Okay, yeah, I need to stop, breathe, count the players on the ice before I drop the puck. I bet you're never going to do that again, or at least probably not for the next couple of games, but you're going to learn from it. And it's hard when you're learning something new. It's not an easy thing for most people, right? So I think, the more you practice, the better you get at something. So going out the next day and getting another game in and learning from that too many men on the ice, you're not going to do it that next game. It's going to be probably a better experience because, hey, I've been here before. I know how to handle this. And also, you're not the only person on the ice. So, taking that in and being like, there's another partner on the ice. I should lean on that person. That person should be helping me out. And that's why we're trying to do more mentorship. So being able to put an official with another older, more maybe experienced official, so you can lean on that official a little bit and say, hey, I think there was too many people out on the ice. Next time, can you make sure to count for me? I'm not very good at that. Or I get really, really panicked and I just want to drop the puck down. Can you make sure that we have the right number of people on? And that's sometimes for the senior official to be like, okay, I need to really count. I'm seeing this trend. I need to really count. So I think, taking a look at it and saying, maybe it's not just me, is also kind of a good thing to take a look at as well.
What advice would you give to that new or learning official at the grassroots level that might have one of those tough nights? Tim?
Yeah, and that's especially being a younger official, like Chelsea said, we've all been there. We've all lived it. The biggest thing is if you can find someone in your local association or find, we don't even have to call them a mentor or a friend, just someone to talk hockey or talk officiating with has always helped me. To have a friend or someone to lean on, to call. Now that's all post game, but I got a little ahead of myself. But yeah, when you're on the ice like that, I think we've all been absolutely terrified when we were younger. We've made a mistake and sometimes we didn't even know we made a mistake. Sometimes we think it's the end of the world. At the end of the day, it's about trying to move on and continuing to work hard. I think you also gain a lot of credibility and respect. Whether people want to admit it or not, if you make a mistake in a game and you're still going to go out there and just give it 100%, try your best and continue to work through things, people are going to recognize that. Not everyone, but your teammates, your fellow officials certainly will. And I would think that goes for fans, not like that matters, but players and coaches and everyone collectively would recognize that, also they might say, hey, he didn't make another mistake or she didn't make another mistake the rest of the way. We could just take the little positives after something like that and try and turn things around for ourselves.
Right. So you said something there, and I think that's really important. And Chelsea's talked about it at numerous times, right? Hustle makes up for some mistakes, right? And even David in the audience just said, you're going to make mistakes. We're going to fail. Just because we're refs doesn't mean we stop being human. And that's the truth. But, if you're hustling, if you're working hard, Chelsea, that's going to make up for some of that sometimes, right? Because they're going to see that you're human and they're going to see you're trying, right?
Right. And that seeing and trying hard is going to build you respect from the coaches, from the players. If you're totally out of it and you're not hustling after, they're just going to continue to spiral and be like, what's this ref doing? But if you're working hard and being like, oh, they know their stuff, they're working really hard. I mean, that professionalism, that appearance aspect, that's a huge part of your seminars, right? If you're working hard, if you're looking the part, you're going to gain respect. You're going to gain credibility. So I think that's a big thing. Working hard and hustle creates that for you.
For sure. And Christopher in our audience just put in a good question. And I think I'll throw this at you, Timmy. We're talking about the advice we give to a younger new official. What if that official's maybe a little older? I think the words were a little longer in the tooth, but still yet a new official. The advice is the same, isn't it?
Yeah, and it doesn't matter whether you're a professional or an amateur, whether you're young, whether you're old, girls hockey, guys hockey, college hockey, pro hockey. I think we've all been there. We will all experience that again at some point. There's no avoiding it. But it's something that you just need to, I think the self-evaluation, like we keep bringing up and talking about, is just so big, because I even do that during the game. Like I'm constantly saying, I need to get here. I need to be here. I should have said this. I wish I would have done that. And, I'm constantly, in my head, bouncing ideas around and working on things. So I'm better in minute 14 than I was in minute 15. And I'm going to try and be better in minute 13 than I was in minute 14. It's a game inside of a game, to me, is how I kind of look at it. I wanted to bring something up with the offside. And that kind of ties into the question you asked me about the player toe picking. And I didn't get around to it, but I wanted to bring up anticipation is a great thing. It's a great thing. It's all we should be anticipating as officials, but never to the degree that we lose focus on a certain play or think there's going to be a certain outcome, or assume some certain action is going to be taken. Because as we grow as officials and you don't even think about things, you just react to things. And we talk about telling officials to just react to situations instead of necessarily having to think about things. It just becomes second nature. And so anticipation is a very, very good thing. But since we're talking about mistakes tonight, it can be very dangerous at the same time, because nothing can ever be assumed.
I think that those are great words. We've got one more question, and as we're coming up to the top of the hour, but I think this is a really good question to end with, and it's, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but you talked about making the one mistake early and then not trying to even up with the marbles. But do you ever find that you're chasing the game, so to speak? So you've made a mistake. Now you're making another mistake. And now all of a sudden it's really tough to get yourself back. So how do you address that? How do you get yourself back so you're not, quote unquote, chasing the game, Chelsea?
I mean, that is a tough thing, right? We're all human and we all have biases, like, oh, I missed that call on blue, now I'm going to have to call one on white. It's tough. You got to try and get out of that thought process, because as soon as you start doing that, then you're going back and forth. You could lose track where you're at. Like, you just got to call it what you see, right? Call it what you see. And you got to move past that past. It's easier said than done, but stop, think what going forward. You got the rest of the game. You need to call what you see and make the correct calls going forward.
No, for sure. Another good question, just real quick here. And Timmy, you talked about it, and it's, how do you manage the anticipation factor, such as not jumping the gun on an offside call, or it looks like boarding is going to happen, so your arm goes up, but then it's a light bump? How do you manage that?
Well, we've all jumped the gun and we've all made that mistake. And after making that mistake, I've realized, by great supervisors helping me and people coaching me as an official, and then me learning myself, is we talked about taking our time. Take that extra second and be sure the action, is a penalty is warranted, or it is offside, or whatever it might be. Take that extra second. It's always okay and better to be late than it is to anticipate and make a mistake. And remember, when people, players, coaches, everyone's watching the game, no one's watching us. So if we take that extra second, and even like Chelsea said, take the deep breath and exhale, if that's what it takes, and evaluate the situation. Nothing ever has to be immediate. After the action is completed, that's when everyone turns their attention and their focus to us. And so it's good to take that extra second. And I have a couple other things I want to pass on when at closing time here, Scott. But I wanted to say, we all have different skills. We all bring different things to the table and different talents when it comes to officiating, different bits and pieces. But it's really important to remember whether you're communicating or officiating or calling penalties or managing the game or managing teams or managing people, to use your authority very skillfully. And I think if we can learn to manage, like use our authority skillfully, then we will eliminate more mistakes too, because mistakes don't always happen during the game. They can happen on the ice after a whistle, between a period, before the game, after the game. I've made mistakes off the ice after games that I'm not so proud of. So I think it's important to remember that. And one of the things that I've kind of always, we keep bringing it up, but we have to learn from our mistakes, but not only learn from your own mistakes, is learn from your teammates' mistakes, learn from others' mistakes, learn from talking to the people you work with in the dressing room, or talking with that friend on the phone, and just having experiences with other people. You can learn and then not make those mistakes yourself.
That's great advice, Tim. Thank you so much for that. Chelsea, anything you wanna add or you wanna offer as we begin to put a ribbon on this one tonight?
Tim did a good job of closing up.
Oh, can I make one more closing argument?
You want one more?
Oh, okay, go for it.
No, Chelsea, I want you to finish.
No, I'm good. You can take one. You can get one more.
It's easier said than done. However, I would like to say, handle your mistakes quickly, be honest, be accountable, evaluate them, communicate, and move on. Done. I'm done.
You just condensed the whole hour into that 30 seconds. So that's perfect. That's going to be our clip that BJ Ringrose takes care of and blasts out on social media tomorrow. So that's perfect. I really want to thank Timmy and Chelsea for joining me tonight as we do get towards the top of the hour here. When we look forward to our next 3 Tuesdays, here's what we can expect to see. Next week, Matt Leaf's going to be on talking about retention of officials. We talked a little bit about mentor programs, and I know we've had a couple of those in the past, couple of Zoomcasts talking about mentor programs, but kind of doing a little more of a deep dive on retention of officials. Then on the 23rd, we're going to talk about altercations, and then on March 30th, towards the end of the month, I'll be back and we're going to talk a little bit about hockey IQ, kind of how does one decision in the game affect other decisions in the game, and how do we want to make sure we look at the game on more of a holistic approach. So those are the shows we've got coming up over the next 3 weeks. But for now, I just once again want to really thank Chelsea and Tim for your contributions and your time tonight. We had some great discussion and some great advice. I want to thank our audience for some really good questions, as well as some good comments in the chat, and look forward to seeing you all again on another Tuesday night Zoomcast. So thanks everyone. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon.